My name is Alex. I'm 38 years old and I run my own successful design agency. A few months ago, after my parents' sudden passing, I sat in an attorney's office and discovered they had left their entire estate, plus a hidden $10 million trust, to my younger sister, Chloe. I was left with a single, handwritten note. Before I tell you what that note said and what I did next, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt completely invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most. It all started long before any wills were written or fortunes were revealed. It started in the small, two-story house I grew up in, a house where love was a currency, and I was always running a deficit. I was the older brother, the responsible one, the trial run. Chloe was the main event. I learned this lesson early, around my 7th birthday. I had spent months talking about a new bicycle, a specific red one with silver streamers on the handlebars I'd seen in the window of the local shop. I drew pictures of it. I did extra chores. I dreamed about it. On my birthday morning, my parents presented me with a practical, navy blue sweater. "It's what you need for school," my mother said, her smile tight. Be grateful I tried to be. But later that day, a brand new, gleaming pink bicycle with a white basket was wheeled out for Chloe, who wasn't even 5 yet. Just because, my father had boomed, lifting her onto the seat. For my little princess, I stood there in my sensible new sweater, the wool already feeling scratchy against my neck, and watched her wobble down the driveway, the center of their universe. That became the pattern of our lives. My straight A's were met with a nod and a, "Well, that's what's expected of you." Alex. Chloe's C+ in art was framed and hung in the hallway, a testament to her burgeoning creative spirit. The financial disparity was just as stark. When I was 16, I desperately wanted a computer. Not for games, but because I had discovered a nascent passion for digital art and coding on the ancient machine at the school library. I knew better than to ask my parents. So I spent an entire summer mowing lawns, bagging groceries, and saving every single dollar. I had a little over $500 tucked away in a showbox under my bed. I was just a week away from being able to afford the floor model at the electronics store. Then came the phone call. Chloe, away at a summer ballet camp she'd gotten bored with after a week, had gone on a shopping spree with her friends. She'd maxed out the emergency credit card my parents had given her. My father sat me down at the kitchen table, his face grim. "Son, we have a bit of a situation," he began. He didn't need to say more. I knew where it was going. He explained that they were a little short this month and needed to cover Chloe's expenses. "How much is in that showbox of yours?" he asked, not meeting my eye. A cold dread washed over me. "Dad, that's my computer money," I whispered. He sighed, a heavy, disappointed sound he reserved just for me. "Alex, you're the man of the house, practically. Your sister, she's sensitive. She doesn't understand these things. It's your duty to help." He didn't demand it. He didn't yell. He just made me feel like my refusal would be the greatest moral failing in history. I trudged upstairs, pulled out the showbox, and handed over the crumpled bills. He counted it, nodded, and said, "Thank you. You're a good son," but I didn't feel like a good son. I felt like a human ATM, and the withdrawal fee was my own dream. I never got that computer. The following Christmas, my parents bought Chloe a brand new laptop because she'd needed it for school, even though all her assignments were handwritten. The day I left for college was less a celebration and more an escape. I'd earned a partial scholarship to a state university 2 hours away, the furthest I could get while still being able to afford tuition. I packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes and my dad's old sedan. There was no fanfare, no tearful goodbye. My mother handed me a $100 bill at the door. "This is it, Alex," she said, her voice businesslike. "We can't afford to help you. This is on you now. It will build character." My father clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than an encouragement. "Remember to call your sister," was all he said. 2 years later, when Chloe decided to go to a private arts college that cost 3 times as much as mine, there was no talk of building character. They co-signed for a massive loan, paid for her dorm deposit, and bought her a brand new car so she wouldn't have to take the campus shuttle. When I asked my mother about it on a rare phone call, her voice turned sharp. "It's different, Alex. Chloe isn't like you. She needs the support. You've always been so independent." It was a compliment that felt like a curse. My independence wasn't a choice, it was a necessity they had engineered. My college years were a blur of instant noodles, late-night shifts at a greasy diner, and the constant, gnawing anxiety of a dwindling bank account. I lived in a tiny, drafty apartment with 2 roommates where the sound of mice in the walls was a constant companion. I remember one brutal winter when my heat broke, and I couldn't afford to get it fixed. I spent 2 weeks sleeping in 3 layers of clothing, my breath fogging in the air. I called home, not to ask for money, but just to hear a voice, to feel some connection. My father answered. "Everything okay?" he asked, distracted. I could hear the television in the background. "Yeah, Dad, it's cold here," he laughed. "Well, that's what happens up north. Builds character, right? Listen, I have to go, the game is on. Say hi to Chloe for me if you talk to her." He hung up. I sat there in the freezing dark, the phone cold against my ear, and I felt a profound sense of loneliness that went deeper than the chill in my bones. The turning point wasn't a sudden windfall or a lucky break. It was a person. Her name was Sarah, and I met her in a senior-level design class I was only able to take because I'd worked triple shifts all summer. I was exhausted, running on fumes, and my work was suffering. I was close to dropping out, convinced my parents had been right all along, that my passion for art was just a silly, unsustainable dream. One afternoon, I was staring at a project on my screen, a logo design that felt flat and lifeless. I was ready to scrap the whole thing. Sarah, who I'd only ever exchanged polite nods with, came over to my desk. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I see?" I shrugged, expecting the usual polite disinterest. But she didn't just glance at it. She pulled up a chair. She asked me about my process, about the meaning behind the shapes, about the feeling I was trying to evoke. She saw things in my work that I hadn't even consciously realized were there. "This is really good, Alex," she said, looking me right in the eye. "You have a real voice." It was the first time anyone, outside of a professor giving a grade, had ever said anything like that to me. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a floodlight turning on in a dark room. Her validation was the support my family had never offered. Sarah became my champion. She believed in me with a ferocity that I couldn't ignore. She helped me build a portfolio, stayed up late with me while I applied for jobs, and celebrated my tiny victories as if they were her own. When I landed my first unpaid internship, she baked me a cake. When I got my first freelance gig that paid $100, she took me out to dinner. She saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself, and she reflected it back to me until I finally started to believe her. After graduation, we moved into a slightly less shabby apartment together. The struggle was still real, but it was no longer lonely. My career was a slow, deliberate climb. I started as a junior designer at a small, faceless marketing firm. The pay was terrible, but I treated every project like it was the most important work in the world. I absorbed everything. I worked weekends. I taught myself new software on my own time. While my friends were out at bars, I was hunched over my laptop, refining my craft. Sarah was always there, bringing me coffee, proofreading my emails, and reminding me to sleep. Every milestone felt monumental. The day I paid off my student loans, a decade after graduating, I cried. The day we had enough for a down payment on a small house in a modest suburb, we held the keys in our hands and felt like royalty. A few years later, I took the biggest leap of my life and started my own agency. The first year was terrifying. I was the CEO, the designer, the accountant, and the janitor. But slowly, client by client, project by project, it grew. My parents' reaction to my success was always lukewarm, filtered through a lens of polite confusion. "Oh, you're still doing that computer art thing," my mother would say during our obligatory holiday calls. "That's nice. Did we tell you Chloe just got a promotion? She's an assistant manager at the boutique now. We're so proud they never once visited my office. They never asked to see my work. To them, my career, the very thing that I had built from nothing, with my own sweat and sacrifice, was just a quaint hobby that somehow paid my bills. It was background noise to the main feature film, which was always Chloe. The house Sarah and I bought was cozy. Chloe's rented downtown condo was chic. My used but reliable car was practical. Chloe's leased luxury SUV was what she deserved. It was a constant, subtle invalidation that kept the wounds of my childhood perpetually fresh. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a major client presentation when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I ignored it, but it buzzed again and again. A prickle of unease went down my spine. I excused myself and answered. It was a state trooper from my hometown. There had been an accident. A patch of black ice, a collision. My parents were gone. The words didn't seem real. It was like listening to a line from a movie. I remember thanking the officer for his calm professionalism, my voice sounding strangely distant. The shock was a thick, insulating blanket, protecting me from the full force of the grief. Despite the years of emotional distance, they were still my parents. The loss was a hollow ache in my chest. I called Sarah, then I called Chloe. She was hysterical, as expected. Through her sobs, the first thing she asked was, "What are we going to do, Alex?" And just like that, I was back in my designated role. The responsible one. I drove the 2 hours to our hometown, my mind a blank slate. I handled everything. The coroner, the funeral home, notifying the relatives. Chloe was a ghost, drifting through the old house, clutching at tissue and leaving a trail of dramatic sighs. Family, friends and distant cousins descended, filling the house with the scent of casserole and cheap perfume. They all clapped me on the shoulder, their faces etched with sympathy. "Your parents were so proud of you, Alex," one of my uncles said, his eyes misty. "They bragged about your company all the time." The words were meant to be a comfort, but they felt like a betrayal, a final, posthumous lie that twisted the knife in my gut. A week later, we were in the office of a man named Mr. Davison, my parents' attorney. He was an old, stoic man with kind eyes that seemed to hold a universe of family secrets. He cleared his throat and began to read the will. It was short and brutally simple. The house, the 2 cars, the modest savings and investment accounts, everything was left to our beloved daughter, Chloe. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I felt a familiar coldness seep into my bones, but I kept my face impassive. I had expected this. But then, Mr. Davison paused. He put on a pair of reading glasses and picked up a second, thicker document. And then, he said, "There is the matter of the Harrington Trust." I had never heard of it. He explained that my maternal grandfather, a successful businessman, had set up a trust fund years ago. My parents were the trustees, and upon their death, the principal and all accrued interest were to be passed on. He looked over his glasses, first at Chloe, then at me. "The current value of the trust," he said slowly, "is $10,462,000. The heir left the room. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The will stipulated that the trust, in its entirety, was to be transferred to a new trust, with Chloe as the sole beneficiary. As for me, Mr. Davison pushed a single, sealed white envelope across the polished mahogany table. "They left this for you, Alex." My hands were trembling as I took the envelope. It felt impossibly light. For a wild, foolish second, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this was it. The apology. The explanation. The acknowledgement that I existed, that I mattered. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, her presence a warm anchor in the icy sea of my shock. I waited until we were in the car to open it. Chloe had stayed behind, already talking to the lawyer about accessing funds. My fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside was a single sheet of my mother's familiar floral stationery, her handwriting a neat, precise script. I read it aloud, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Alex," it began. "We know you'll be disappointed about the will. But we need you to understand. You've always been so strong, so independent. You know how to take care of yourself. Chloe is more sensitive. She's fragile. She needs this security to navigate the world. We trust that you will understand and continue to look after your sister. It is your duty as her older brother. With love, Mom and Dad. The air in the car was thick with the weight of that one word, duty. It wasn't a letter, it was a final invoice. It was the ultimate act of gaslighting, delivered from beyond the grave. My entire life, my forced independence, my struggle, it wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a justification. A convenient excuse to write me off, not just financially, but emotionally. Sarah was silent for a long moment, then she let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. Her anger was a shield for me, a righteous fire that burned away the numbness and left raw, clarifying pain. When Chloe finally emerged from the building, she had the dazed look of a lottery winner. "Alex, I had no idea," she breathed, her eyes wide. "I swear. It's so much. I don't know what to do." But behind the performance of shock, I saw it. A flicker of triumph. A subtle shift in her posture. The golden child had just received her crown. For a week, I was a ghost in my own life. I went to my office, I sat in meetings, I nodded and smiled, but my mind was replaying that scene in the lawyer's office, the words of that note branding themselves onto my soul. My duty, was that all I had ever been to them? A safety net? A backup plan? The responsible cog in the family machine, designed to support the fragile, precious centerpiece. Then, exactly 1 week after the reading of the will, my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice, usually light and airy, was tight with panic. "Alex, I need your help," she said, without any preamble. "Mr. Davison just called. There are debts." I listened silently as she explained. The family home had a second mortgage I never knew about. Both of their luxury cars had outstanding loans. There were credit card bills, thousands of dollars worth. The money from their savings had been exhausted just paying for the funeral. The $10 million trust was real, but it was tied up in legal processes and wouldn't be accessible for at least a few months. The creditors, however, were not willing to wait. "I need $50,000, Alex," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just as a loan. You can afford it. Dad always said you were so good with money." The irony was so profound it was almost comical. After being explicitly written out of their financial legacy, I was now being asked to bail it out. The man who was left nothing was being asked to front the money for the woman who was left everything. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing my disappointment, of accepting my role, it all curdled into a hard, cold resolve. "Okay, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We should meet and discuss this. But not at the house. Let's meet at my lawyer's office tomorrow. And I'm bringing Sarah." The next day, we sat in a sterile conference room at my attorney's firm, a place that felt like my territory. It wasn't the polished mahogany of my parents' world, it was sleek glass and steel, a world I had built. Chloe arrived looking flustered, clutching a file of overdue bills. Sarah sat beside me, a silent, solid presence. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Albright, sat at the head of the table. "Chloe," I began, my voice steady. "Before we talk about any loans, I think we need to talk about something else." I took a deep breath and I laid it all out. I started with the pink bicycle. I talked about the navy blue sweater. I talked about the $500 from my showbox that paid for her shopping spree. I recounted the story of my broken heater and my father's breezy dismissal. I described working my way through college on diner grease and ramen while she lived in a parent-funded apartment. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture of my first office, a corner of my bedroom. "You never saw this," I said. Neither of them did. I laid the handwritten note from our parents on the table. "And then there's this," I said. "My inheritance. A demand for my duty." I looked her dead in the eye, the years of suppressed anger finally finding a voice. My entire life, I was the responsible one. I was the one who had to build character. I was the one who was too independent to need help. But it was a lie. My independence wasn't a choice, it was a condition of my birth. My role was to be the family's unpaid intern, the janitor, the emergency fund, while you got the promotions, the praise, and the love. And now, you sit here, with $10 million waiting for you, and you have the audacity to ask me for a loan. You're not asking for a loan, Chloe. You're trying to cash in my final invoice. Chloe's face went through a rapid series of emotions, confusion, shock, and then, settling on indignant anger. The victim mask she wore so well finally cracked. How can you be so selfish, she spat, her voice rising. This is what Mom and Dad wanted. They knew I couldn't handle things like you can. You're just jealous. You always have been, ever since we were kids. She gestured wildly at the papers in front of her. This is a mess. And you're sitting there, bringing up ancient history just to make me feel bad? You're trying to punish me for what they decided. Sarah placed a calming hand on my arm, but I didn't need it. The rage had burned away, leaving behind a strange, liberating clarity. No, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm not jealous. I'm free. For the first time in my life, I am utterly, completely free from the weight of their expectations, and yours. I pushed the handwritten note back across the table toward her. They thought I was strong. They thought I was independent. They were right. I am. I built a life, a business, and a home without a single dollar of their help. And now, you're going to have to do the same. Her jaw dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying I am not giving you $50,000, I stated plainly. I am not giving you $1. You have a $10 million asset. You can hire a financial advisor. You can go to a bank and get a bridge loan against the trust. You can learn how to manage a budget. You can figure it out. Just like I did. They said you were sensitive and I was strong. Here's your chance to prove them wrong. She started to cry then, but they weren't tears of grief or remorse. They were tears of pure, unadulterated panic. The safety net she had relied on her entire life had just been pulled away, and she was in free fall. You can't do this to me, she wailed. I'll lose the house. I'll be ruined. I stood up. The house was never really yours to begin with, was it? It was just another thing they gave you. Sell it. Pay the debts. Start over. That's what adults do. I paused at the door and looked back at my sister, a stranger in a room I had paid for. My relationship with you is now officially the same as my relationship with them was. It's transactional. If you need professional advice on branding or marketing for whatever you decide to do with your life, my agency would be happy to consult with you. At our standard corporate rate. Otherwise, Chloe, we have nothing more to discuss. I walked out of that room with Sarah by my side, and for the first time since I was a little boy staring at a pink bicycle, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I felt like I had finally won. The months that followed were a study in blissful silence. I blocked Chloe's number. I redirected emails from her new address to a junk folder I never checked. A few flying monkeys from the extended family tried to intervene, aunts and cousins calling to tell me I was tearing the family apart, that I was being cruel to my grieving sister. To each one, Sarah and I calmly and factually explained the situation, the lifetime of financial and emotional neglect, the $10 million trust, the note demanding my duty. The calls stopped. The truth, it turned out, was a powerful repellent. We heard through the grapevine that Chloe had been forced to sell the family home. She had to do it quickly, at a significant loss, just to cover the mountain of debt my parents had hidden. She had to sell their cars, her car, and most of the furniture. She was, for the first time in her 36 years, on her own. There was a part of me, a deeply conditioned part, that felt a pang of something resembling guilt. But Sarah, my rock, reminded me. You didn't do this to her, Alex, she would say. Their choices did this. Her choices did this. You are just choosing to no longer clean up the mess. The absence of that low-level hum of anxiety, the constant, subconscious effort of trying to earn their approval, was staggering. It was like I had been carrying a 100-pound backpack my entire life and had only just realized I could take it off. My work improved. My creativity flourished. My relationship with Sarah deepened into a new level of partnership and peace. We took that vacation we had always put off, a 2-week trip to Italy where we ate pasta, drank wine, and didn't check our emails once. We invested more money into my agency, hiring 2 new talented designers. We were building our own legacy, one based on mutual respect, hard work, and genuine affection. One evening, about a year after the confrontation, an email slipped through my filters. It was from Chloe. The subject line just said, "Hi." The message was short, stilted, and awkward. It talked about how hard it was to manage everything, how she'd hired a financial advisor who was teaching her how to budget. Tucked into the end of a paragraph was the phrase, "I guess I never realized how much you did on your own." I'm sorry it was like that. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was riddled with self-pity. But it was a start. I didn't reply. Not yet. Maybe someday I would. But for now, my peace was too new, too precious to risk. My parents, in their final, misguided act, had given me the greatest gift of all. By leaving me nothing, they had given me everything. They forced me to find my value not in a will or a bank account, but in my own resilience. They forced me to build a life so strong and a sense of self so secure that no one could ever devalue it again. My validation comes from the pride I see in my wife's eyes, the camaraderie I share with my team, and the quiet satisfaction of looking at the life I built, not with inherited wealth, but with my own 2 hands. I spent a lifetime chasing a prize that was never meant for me, and in losing their rigged race, I finally won my freedom. And that's my story. It was a painful lesson, but one I desperately needed to learn. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with your family to protect your own peace? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching.